At the A4ID Responsible Business event on the 10th of December 2012, our speakers highlighted the many ways in which lawyers play an important advisory role at a number of stages in the life of an impact investment. In this recording, you will hear from Andy Lauer, Executive Director of the Eleos Foundation, and Michelle Peters, an Associate in the Financial Services Practice Group at Dechert LLP.
Thank you all for having us here with you. I came in from California last night, so you can probably tell from my accent I'm not a native American, or I'm not American, but we are based in Santa Barbara, California, and we have a small foundation that's trying to do what we can in the fight to eradicate extreme poverty, trying to open up pipelines of capital and trying to be catalytic in the space. So 3.5 years ago, I was fortunate enough to meet Advocates for International Development, and in my mind, they're one of the best game-changing groups to be associated with. And without their hard work, we would have never been able to do our model that we are doing. And so one of the things that I'm keen to do is to champion them and to be endorsing their hard work. I'm also really honoured, but slightly nervous, to be here with our lawyer. It's always good to be in the same room as your lawyer to safeguard you, but also keep you on your toes. So Michelle has been doing a fantastic job for us from Dechert. She and her team have saved us hundreds of thousands of dollars worth of legal fees, as well as providing a phenomenal level of expertise, which again has been really valuable for our model. So what I wanted to do is kind of an update on an overview of what our model is and what we're doing, for those of you not familiar with Eleos, and then Michelle will talk to a bit more of the nuances from the legal perspective, and then we'll hear from our colleagues here at Reed Smith. So we're in the fight to eradicate extreme poverty. That's what we're about. Our DNA is one of educate, empower, engage. We invest in early stage entrepreneurs that are eradicating extreme poverty. We see that as one of the key opportunities there is to have the best bang for your buck in the fight to eradicate extreme poverty. So the way that we do that, we were a retreat centre, just to give a bit more background, a retreat centre that was based outside of Santa Barbara, California, a couple of hours north of LA. The retreat centre was sold and there was a pot of money that was left over. Very random story. So that's now a private foundation, and they asked me to work as the executive director to find pioneering ways where we could be innovative in the space. So we came in and thought there was a crazy opportunity to be empowering early stage entrepreneurs. That was where we felt there was the biggest gap in the market, and we could do that with philanthropic capital as a private foundation because we could afford to take risks that mainstream investors weren't prepared to take. But we wanted to be catalytic. We wanted to open up pipelines of capital, and you can only do so much with philanthropic dollars. The biggest win is using for-profit dollars to be able to have a bigger catalytic impact. So the way that we are structured at Eleos is that we are a private foundation as a 501c3. We have a wholly owned for-profit subsidiary, Eleos Investments Management LLC, of which I'm the CEO. And then that manages each individual geographically focused fund, which is what they call series LLCs, that manages each deal that we do on a deal-by-deal basis. So Michelle can talk about some of the nuances behind that, but the idea was how can we get for-profit dollars to flow through us to be able to then be able to invest in for-profit businesses in the developing world so that when the investment goes full circle, the investors can get their money back and have a biggest bang for their buck. So we saw this gap in the market where there's a lot of investors that are waiting to put in $1 million minimum investments, and there's an awful lot of ideas that are being created, a lot of entrepreneurs that are coming up with good ideas, but they can't get to the starting line. They can't get across to be ready and acceptable for $1 million minimum investments. So we break our investments into two categories. We have the solo investments that we do as a foundation. We use our capital even as grants or as seed investments, get to know the entrepreneur, take on the initial risk, and our minimum has been reduced every year. We now have a minimum of $20,000 that we invest. So we invest in the range of $20,000 to $50,000 with the solo seed investments. And then when we feel comfortable with the entrepreneurs, we then open up the LLC structure to allow for other investors to invest their for-profit dollars through us, which we then invest in the entrepreneurs. We see that there are a number of entrepreneurs that are desperately keen to be getting out there in the space but don't have true patient capital, entrepreneur-friendly investors that are working alongside them. So in addition to us opening up pipelines of monetary capital, we really have found that it's needed a lot of intellectual capital to work patiently alongside the entrepreneurs to be able to get them ready for these $1 million minimum investments. So I am here just for a couple of days in London, off to Amsterdam tomorrow, and then on Wednesday I go over to Kenya to look at some of the the deals that we've got bubbling away in Kenya. So I thought it would be helpful for the next few minutes just to give an overview of some of the deals to actually put some life on this very nice diagram and all this theory behind it. What are we really talking about? I'm aware that this audience is quite broad. Some of you have got a huge wealth of experience of doing these early stage deals. For some of you, this may be quite new. So I apologise if it's too basic or too complicated, but there will be a chance for Q&A to ask some questions. So this is how we've worked with our Kenya fund. These are 5 of the deals that we currently have, to give you a brief overview. So Zana A, they're looking to manufacture sanitary pads. They found that there was a huge dropout rate of girls not being able to complete their high school education or their senior school education, depending on what jurisdiction you're in. And so they come up with a novel idea to be able to explore how they can manufacture sanitary pads in Africa. So a really good concept, a really good idea. We gave them a grant to be able to explore that further. Copia Global is a catalogue model. So how can you use opportunities to get goods into rural communities at affordable prices for base of the pyramid consumers to be able to buy? Penda Health is a health clinic focusing on women's and maternal health, where we've invested some money with them. And then the 2 that I'll talk about a bit more, DDD, which uses global outsourced job creation, helps get kids through school. And then Sanergy, which is their tagline is turning shit into gold. They're quite literally taking the piss out of poverty. And what they do is they build toilets in the slums of Kenya. They have a franchise model, and then they use the human waste that they collect to be able to convert into fertilizer. And so to give you kind of an overview of how we've worked with them, Sanergy were over here when we started working with them a year and a half ago. We gave a $20,000 grant. We then made a $50,000 investment. We then opened up our LLC structure to get $380,000 from other investors to come through us. They had 2 toilets that they had when we met them, so we really liked the idea, but very high risk. They got 2 toilets, they're trying to get to 1,000. And other investors were a bit more nervous about coming in as early as we did. They're now up to 150 and looking to get to 1,000 toilets by the end of next year. So we're trying to back some winners. We're trying to see if this game-changing group manages to take off, then it becomes a game changer for sanitation in Kenya. But we're aware of the challenges that we're working with. So I just talked a bit about Sanergy. What they also have is a job creation model with their franchise model. So they have 75 franchisees who are then able to lease the toilet from them to be able to charge for the toilet to be used. But the real money is being made in the fertilizer, as that addresses health issues. DDD, working in the slums, like I said, they're a job creator, so they use outsourced jobs, so Ancestry.com, other groups that are emerging like that require lots of data entry, data input, and what they do is they work in parallel with the students to be able to afford for them to be able to complete their college education and acquiring computer literate skills. So we've done a straight debt deal with them. They needed debt financing as opposed to equity financing, but we're struggling to get to the scale without the debt financing that we provided. So they're the ones that we're doing in Kenya, and then just briefly to kind of let you know where we're working in the other places. The first deal that we've done was a group called eHealthPoint, which some of you may be familiar with. They provide access to safe drinking water, clean drinking water, and they're also exploring novel ideas to be able to have flat screen TVs to be able to connect you with a doctor 6 hours away. So in rural communities in Kenya, rural poor Indians in India pay to be able to get safe drinking water, and then they pay for the opportunity to be able to see a doctor on a flat screen TV. And the last investment that I'll just talk about briefly is the first one that we've done in Liberia, and that's with a group called Liberty and Justice. They're Africa's first fair trade certified garment manufacturer, so trying to find a new pioneering way to be able to have job creation. They have a worker-owned cooperative, so the women who work in the factory own 49% of the factory, which obviously increases great access for jobs. We went to Liberia looking for health and education opportunities to work there. When you go to Liberia, it's 80% unemployment, so trying to find market-based solutions in the area of health and education is complicated with such a high unemployment rate. Of the first 36 women that have been employed in the factory, 6 have divorced their husbands. They now have a 25% divorce rate for the 100 women that they've been employed in the factory. So a fascinating statistic, and the reason I close with that is that we came with a very linear approach to poverty. You want kids in schools, you want people to have health clinics, but if you actually empower women and empower people in the developing world, then they can make different choices to what you might expect, but it's all about empowering. So that's kind of a snapshot of what we're doing. We'll have an opportunity for Q&A at the end, but some exciting groups that we're working with. So with that, I'll hand over to you, Michelle, to fill in the gap.
Sure. I just wanted to give some background on the LLC structures that Andy mentioned. When Andy approached us about 3 or 4 years ago to help with some legal questions that Eleos had, one of the things that they wanted to do was leverage the due diligence they've been doing on their own for foundations investments to bring in co-investors. And so
That's good. Okay.
So what we talked about with them were their goals for risk management and private placements and et cetera. And we came up with we decided to do the series LLC structure. And so for those of you who aren't familiar with Delaware corporate law, a limited liability company is kind of like a limited partnership. The main difference is the liability that attaches to the sponsor of the fund. And then within Delaware, you can set up something called a series partnership or a series LLC, where each individual series, it's like a separate class of the LLC, but all the assets and liabilities are segregated. For those of you familiar with Cayman corporate structures, it's kind of like a segregated portfolio company, where you have the individual funds within an overall fund structure. And Andy ultimately decided to go with this approach because these are such high-risk investments that it was very important to the potential investors they had in their base and to the foundation itself that if an investment blew up, the other investments wouldn't be adversely affected. So it's a little bit more paperwork to set up a new series every time, and it's a bit more work on the fundraising end. We have to raise money for each individual deal, but ultimately, given the high risk of these potential investments, we thought this was the right approach to go to. And so in addition to setting up those funds, getting the governing documents together, offering documents, etc., we've also advised Eleos on Investment Advisors Act issues. So because Eleos is evaluating potential investments and bringing in co-investors, they potentially qualify as an investment advisor under SEC regulations. And so we've been advising them on how to, whether or not they want to register in the United States or in California where they're based, and if not, what they have to do to avoid becoming to avoid tripping registration requirements. We also helped them set up the management company, and recently we have been bringing in attorneys from our other groups to work with Eleos a little bit farther back in the process on the actual foundation investment stage. So we've gotten attorneys from our finance group and our corporate group to evaluate and negotiate loan documents and private placements. And that has been a pretty exciting development because for our finance attorneys who are negotiating loan documents all day, if you say to them, you have a pro bono requirement, go do something good, they say, well, what can I do besides learn a new skill? And this is a way for them to take the skills that they've learned negotiating documents and helping them meet their pro bono requirement and helping Eleos meet their goals. And it also helps on the fund side as well, because those documents that we negotiate for the foundation are then used for the funds. And if there are provisions that won't work from our perspective, we find out about that before they're finalized. Anything else I should mention?
That's good.
Okay, that's what we do for Eleos.